What's up, Yinzers, Yinzets? Welcome back to the first October edition of Pucks and Nat. We're going to give you the latest downtime breakdowns, everything from this past week in Penguins hockey, and we can officially say that the regular season is upon us. Training camp came to a close. Today is Monday. Final rosters were submitted at 5 p.m. And we actually just got word of what the final roster officially was. We kind of already knew that. But we'll get to that in a second. I'm here with co-host Hunter Hodes. Hunter, how does it feel to finally be back at the regular season and with the season starting up again?
First off, it's about damn time. I'm so glad we're done with 7 preseason games. That's going to be going away next season because we're going to be going down to 4 preseason games. There's just never a need for 7 preseason games. And I think you saw that, Kelsey, over the weekend where Tampa Bay and Florida were kind of making a mockery out of the preseason just by going full WWE against each other in back-to-back games. And it's just like, we don't need this. Nobody needs this for the preseason. So I'm just stoked we got regular season hockey back and roster was just put out. I will give you full credit. You had both Brunicke and Kindel on your mock roster that we talked about last week. I did not. So you will take the victory lap for that one.
I will take the W gladly on that one. Never a doubt in my mind about Brunicke. And as camp bore on, Kindel was showing a lot more. So couldn't deny it, Hunter. Couldn't deny it. But yeah, so speaking of the final roster, we will get back to Bruno. It's getting late, guys. We'll get back to Brunicke and Kindel a little bit later, but I do want to reveal what the final roster is, just in case you aren't in the know at this point. Like we said, this was kind of established on Saturday, so it's the same 23 players, but it's official now. So let's go ahead and read off the final roster. So 13 forwards, you got Noel Acciari, Justin Brazeau, Sidney Crosby, Connor Dewar, Philip Hollander, Ben Kindel, Ville Koivunen, Blake Lizotte, Evgeny Malkin, Anthony Mantha, Tommy Novak, Rickard Rakell, and Philip Tomasino. On the back end, you got 8D this time around, and that includes Harrison Brunicke, Connor Clifton, Matt Dumba, Caleb Jones, Eric Carlson, Chris Letang, Ryan Shea, and Parker Weatherspoon. And then your 2 goaltenders, at least to start the season, will be Tristan Jarry and Artur Shilovs. So, and then also Kevin Hayes, Brian Rust, Rucker McGroarty are all still on injured reserve, as well as Tanner Howe, Jack St. Ivany, and Yoel Blomqvist. So there you have it. There's your final 23-man roster. And as Hunter said, I had the 2 young guns on the roster, never a doubt in my mind. But Hunter, just want to get your initial thoughts, first of all, on just this 23-man roster and what it kind of signifies as far as the direction that this team might be going this season.
Well, they were correct with the youth movement. They said they weren't going to block some of these young kids, and that's exactly what happened. Kelsey, I believe you still said Sidney Crosby during the 23-man roster. Maybe I was deaf during that.
Oh, I said it, yeah.
Okay, I wanted to make sure.
Couldn't miss Sidney Crosby.
We're not going to miss Sidney Crosby here on the 23-man roster. But again, we might be both having the case of the Mondays today. But yeah, like you see part of the youth movement here. Ville Koivunen is also on the team. That one was never a doubt in my mind, even though there are still quite a few veteran forwards on this team. They were never going to send Ville Koivunen back down to Wilkes-Barre. To me, he is NHL ready. Philip Hollander, I got that one right. I know some others didn't, but there was never a doubt in my mind that he wasn't going to be on the roster. I think he's ready for a full-time NHL spot. We'll have to see, Kelsey, if he makes his debut on Tuesday, just because he's kind of been a little bit of the odd man out at practice, but I think you'll see him come in and out of games this season. But at least for now, there are still some veterans here, but I think as the season goes on, you might see some of them get phased out, especially with teams calling for trades and all that. The Penguins are going to be aggressive on the trade market. I know a lot of people are going to be upset that Noel Acciari is still on this team. To me, it was never really a question that he was not going to make it. Like, I figured he was going to be on this team. A lot of the players like him. He's usually a fine penalty killer. Last year, not so much, but usually he's fine penalty killing. He can block a lot of shots. He doesn't bring a lot of offense, but I do think as the year goes on, I don't think he's going to play in every game. And I don't think he's going to finish the season with the Penguins. So with that, you'll be able to get a younger player up to fill that spot. That's number one there. I think you can say the same for Blake Lizotte. His contract is also up. Would not be surprised if he is traded by the deadline. That's another spot where a younger player can come in. Kevin Hayes, who's injured, same thing. So there's going to be more opportunities for even more younger players to come up throughout the season and really put a stamp on a potential full-time spot. But at least to start, they're slowly incorporating some of this young talent. They didn't block some of them, especially Harrison Brunicke, and congratulations, especially to Ben Kindel. Nobody saw this coming when camp started. Like, if you are someone who saw this coming, please step forward so you can submit my lottery ticket, honestly, because what a camp he had, what a preseason he had. And I'm excited to see what he can do for at least a few games. I don't think he's going to stick around beyond the 9 games, but hell, I've been surprised this whole time with him. I'll be surprised again if he sticks beyond 9 games, but he and Brunicke are both making their NHL debuts on Tuesday, and I'm excited for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on Kindel and Brunicke for a second too, you know, head coach Dan Muse made this known that it's something that they didn't have anything set in stone, you know, heading into this training camp. And he re-emphasized that. And that's kind of what Kyle Dubas said at the beginning too. You know, he said the young guys are coming, they would take care of the veterans. If that, you know, became the case where they needed to push some veterans off the roster in favor of some young guys pushing for spots. And we saw that happen with Ryan Graves getting waived to make way for Harrison Brunicke to make the roster, because Brunicke earned this roster spot. And it's the same thing with Kindel. And Dan Muse did say today, you know, he was asked about this. And again, he kind of put his foot down and said, they earned this. I said it the other day. This wasn't something that we came in, that we started training camp or went through the summer saying, okay, these guys are going to be in. Those 2 players were given an opportunity, and along the way, they earned new opportunities. And through those new opportunities, they're here now today. So, you know, these guys pushed and pushed and pushed, and they kept knocking at the door, and they kept earning more and more opportunity as camp wore on. And I think that's especially the case with Kindel. And we said this last week, but Kindel played in 6 of the 7 preseason games. Usually that's an indicator that a player is doing something right. The same thing happened with Rucker McGroarty last season. Rucker McGroarty made the camp or made the roster out of camp last season, stayed up for 3 games, got sent back afterwards. But at the end of the day, you know, I think a lot of people expected names like Tristan Brose, Avery Hayes to be on this roster. I can count myself as somebody who thought Brose was going to be on this opening night roster.
Avery Hayes for me.
But the fact of the matter is, you know, I think in these last string of games, Kindel simply just blew everyone out of the water, and he kind of made a case for himself that it was hard to leave him off of this roster after the effort he put forth. So, and the thing about Brose and Hayes and those guys too, they're going to be the first guys called up, you know, at the first injury, you know, when things start reshuffling. And as you said, there could be trades. We don't know what's going to happen with some of these other veterans. Perhaps there's more waivers, you know, as the season bores on, and once they get a clearer picture of what this lineup's going to look like on a night-to-night basis. There's a lot of experimentation right now. And I think it was probably unrealistic to expect every single young player who probably deserved it to make this roster. I don't think that was going to happen. I don't think that's a fault of management either. I think that they're just kind of still in this process of figuring out where they're at and what they want this lineup to look like for the majority of the season. So we'll see how things shake out on the trade front, because another thing you can't really discount is, again, Rickard Rakell, Brian Rust, and Erik Karlsson are all still here. That could be not the case a few months from now. So we'll see what happens on that front. But I want to kind of talk about Hollander for a second, because it does seem like he's, you know, as you mentioned, a little bit on the outside looking in. He hasn't been taking line rushes with the main group. He's kind of been that 13th guy. I think that his camp got better as it went on. I even said last week that I thought I wanted to see a little bit more from him. He did deliver on that. He tied for, I think, the preseason lead in points, if I'm not mistaken, with Philip Tomasino. He had 5, right?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, Hollander went out and, you know, put out a good camp. Talked to him yesterday. He feels pretty good going into the season. So, Hunter, I just want to ask you, like, where do you think you see him kind of factoring into this lineup, especially, you know, as some of these veterans might be, switched out. Maybe is Kindel sent back to juniors as we kind of expect at this point? Where do you see him kind of making an impact in this lineup?
I think still the bottom six. I think they're going to put him at wing. I know he was getting a little bit of center time at training camp, but I still feel like he's going to play a lot of wing this season. Like he's been playing a lot of wing throughout his career. He was a winger in Sweden, especially these last couple of years. I think you're going to see that from him. And either the third or fourth line. I think you can put him on either one, and I think he's a good depth forward to have. He can give you some goals. His playmaking ability really turned a corner once he got over to Sweden. Honestly, his all-around game really turned a corner once he got over there. And, I just want to see him bring that game back over here to the NHL. So, yeah, I do think he's going to be a healthy scratch to start the year, but I still think he's going to get into the lineup for a fair amount of games. Like, I don't think this is going to be a player where they're healthy scratching him for, 10 to 12 in a row. Like, I know right now it looks like he's not going to play on opening night on Tuesday, but I think, maybe later this week or maybe next week once they go to California, because they have the California trip early, so maybe he'll get in the lineup then. But I think the bottom six role where he can play with a creative center, I think works best for him.
Yeah, I would agree. And you mentioned earlier with Achari, I don't think he's somebody that's going to be in the lineup every night this year. Even if he does hang around the Penguins roster, he's not somebody that needs to be in the lineup every night. So that's kind of a perfect opportunity to have a little bit of a rotation going, see who's hot, who's not, and kind of rotate in the guys who are, producing, putting forth whatever effort that they want to see from them. So we'll see how that goes. But let's focus on the young guys for a second. I know I do want to get back to Brunicke and Kindel briefly, but I want to talk about Ville Koivunen for a second too, because you did mention, you expected him to make this roster. I was the same way. There was never a doubt in my mind. I mean, he was pretty much glued to Sid's hip for most of camp here.
Right.
So there wasn't really too much of a doubt that Ville Koivunen was going to make this roster. But obviously he had 7 points in 8 games to close out the season last year. Everybody knows this at this point, but it seemed like, he really kind of refined a lot of those areas in his game that maybe needed a little bit of refining. And I know we both mentioned it, watching him in training camp, but his skating looks a lot better this season, I think, already in the preseason. So I just want to know, what are your expectations for Koivunen this season? Even when Russ comes back, do you see him sticking with Sid? Is there going to kind of be a little bit of a carousel in the top 6 between, Sid and Malkin and Koivunen? And where do you think he might end up in the Calder race? Because I think that's kind of a given with Demidov, de facto at the beginning of the season. But do you see him kind of inserting himself in that conversation?
To be determined. I think maybe he'll get a few votes at the end of the season, but I don't think anyone's going to challenge Demidov. If someone maybe does, it's Matthew Schaefer of the Islanders, and he's going to make his NHL debut this week. But unless Demidov gets hurt, I would be stunned if someone else wins the Calder. I think Demidov is the odds-on favorite for a reason. He's disgusting with the puck on his stick. So maybe Koivunen gets a few late place votes, but I don't think he's going to challenge for that award. I even say the same for being a finalist. I think that's too extreme for me. But I think a successful season for him, if you can get 15 goals, 20 assists for 35 points in an 82 game season, I think you're looking really strong going into a second season next year. That's almost half a point per game for a player that, he was close to a point per game last season, 7 points in 8 games, but over an 82 game season, that's not going to stick. There's going to be times where you have a dry spell and you're going a few games without a point and such like that. But if you can get 15 goals, 20 assists for 35 points, hell, you get up to 40 points, I think you might be kind of exceeding expectations. That's truly almost basically half a point per game for a rookie player playing in the top 6. And then you can start looking at, maybe he can be a 50-point player later on in his career. So I'm just trying to manage expectations. I don't want people going overboard. I'm glad that he's getting the first dibs with Crosby. That's very deserved. And even when Rust comes back, I could still see, maybe Rust taking Brazeau's spot. And by the way, people were freaking out about Justin Brazeau on the second line today. That he is very much a placeholder for Brian Rust until he comes back. And I don't expect Rust to be out that long. Like they said, it's, a minimum of 2 weeks. He wasn't at practice today, but I still don't think it's going to be that long. I think once he's back, he's going to take that spot in the top 6. And, they can still go Sid with Rust and Raquel, but I could also see them keeping Koivunen up there, which I wouldn't mind. And then you have Rust with Malkin. So they have a lot of opportunities there, but I still think you got to keep him in the top 6 for most of the year, in my opinion.
All right. Well, I'm going to divert from you a little bit because I do want to manage expectations for Koivunen too, because I think it's important for people to understand that, development doesn't stop when a player reaches the NHL level. It's not like you have all this development at the lower levels and then you get to the NHL and it's voila, this player's made. There's still a lot of development that takes place for several years for a lot of these players entering the NHL. And that's going to be the case with pretty much all of these young guys that you'll see populate the NHL roster. That said, I do think, I don't think that, the 7 points in 8 game pace is sustainable for Koivunen next season either. I think that's a lofty expectation, but I think 35 points is maybe underselling a little bit, especially with, if he's playing with Crosby this whole year, and he's playing in that top 6 the whole year. I mean, maybe 15 goals is a realistic expectation because we even saw last season the biggest strength in Koivunen's game is his playmaking and his vision. So I don't think even, in his prime, I don't think he's going to be somebody that is going to be like Jake Gensel scoring 40 goals per season. Like, that's not the type of player he is, but I could see him kind of racking up those assists, especially playing alongside Sid, especially if that line sticks with Raquel there. You got a finisher on that line. Just him being in that top 6 and working on that second power play unit will present opportunity for him to produce. To me, I think that he could reach that 40-point plateau this season. I expect him to exceed that. I wouldn't expect point per game, but I think he could get well above that 40-point range if he sticks with Sid the whole season. So we'll see what happens there. I agree with you. No one's touching Demidov in that Calder race. So if he's healthy, that's basically his to take home right now. So we'll see what happens there. But let's just real quickly jump back to Brunicke and Kindel. I know we've talked a lot about them already, but I want to talk specifically about this 9-game trial because, there's already a lot of discourse about Kindel already being sent back to juniors, within this 9-game trial. Brunicke is a little bit murkier of a situation, I do think. But just if you had to predict what's going to happen here, there seemed to be a large faction of Penguins fans, loud ones on Penguins Twitter, who kind of feel like, this 9-game trial situation is almost a facade for the Penguins to basically send them both back and then just fill those spots with veterans. So do you think both of these guys could stick? Do you think one of them's going to stick? Or do you think they're both going to be sent back at the end of these 9-game trial, regardless of, performance here?
I do think Ben Kindel is going to be sent back unless he just absolutely explodes off the scene and maybe is a point per game in those 9 games. I just think the grind of an 82-game season, going from the CHL to the NHL as an 18-year-old is really hard. And you're now playing against grown men and veterans who have hundreds of points, players that are going to come at you in ways that you've never experienced before. And, I think some fans on Twitter just undersell that aspect. And it's like, you're not playing against teenagers anymore. You're playing against grown men who are, a lot of these players are veterans. So again, I just think some people really undersell that. And it's just really hard to keep up that for a full 82-game season. Like, yes, I know I didn't have him on my mock roster. Like, I had them sending him back, but I'm also okay with them kind of saying, hey, we're going to reward you for at least a few games based on what you did in camp and preseason. We're going to give you a taste of what this looks like. And then, again, for me, I think they're going to send him back and be like, hey, we like what you did, but we're going to get you cooked up a little bit more in junior, dominate down there. You can maybe make the World Junior roster for Team Canada for that. And then next year we can have an even bigger conversation about you potentially being a full-time NHL player. I'm always cautious with ELCs. I don't want to just burn a year of his ELC for the sake of it. Like, I don't want, a Daniel Sprong situation, Kelsey, where they kept him beyond the 9 games and then he lasted a few more games after that, and then they had to send him back. And then, again, his ELC kicks in. So that's just the cautious part of me coming out. So you better be 100% sure about him beyond 9 games. to the point where you are comfortable burning a year of his ELC. I don't think they're going to be that comfortable unless he blows them away even more, which is why I think he is going to be sent back. And again, that's not a bad thing. You can have him cook for one more year. Then there's a deeper conversation to be had about him making the full-time roster for 82 games next season. But at the very least, I think he'll be AHL eligible for next year, which will be huge because that rule is going to kick in for next season. As for Harrison Brunicke, I think there's a much better chance that he stays up past the 9 games. He's ahead of Kindel in his development. You know, you can definitely make the argument that there's nothing left for him to learn in Kamloops just because that team is not going to be good this year. Really sucks, Kelsey, is that he can't go to the AHL this year. I think that would have been a really good situation for him. Honestly, part of me kind of wonders, I know he's on the NHL roster because he had a good camp in preseason, but part of me still wonders if he had been eligible for the AHL this year, would he have started there and then came up a bit later on in the season just to get him some more minutes down there just because he hasn't played a lot of AHL games. But I think they're, again, like Kindel, rewarding him. You had a great camp in preseason. We're going to give you a taste of this, but because you're a bit further ahead in your development, you're going to have, at least to me, a little bit of a longer leash. And it looks like he's going to play on the third pairing. That's the right call. So let's just see how he does as well. But if I had to say right now, Brunicke has a better chance of staying the full year and maybe playing, I don't know, 50-ish, 55 games. I don't think he's going to play every night, nor should he.
Yeah, I generally agree. I think, you know, with Kindel, all that stuff is definitely to be kept in mind. And I think I sparked a little bit of a debate the other day. I posted something about like size and everything. And this is purely from a size perspective. I do get the size argument, but at the same time, there are plenty of elite NHL players that are undersized. And this is something, you know, size factor isolated, I don't think that's a good enough reason to hold Kindel back if he shows readiness in every other area. But there is something to the grind of an 82 game season. And there is something to, like you said, facing this NHL competition on a nightly basis, because it is a lot different than facing teenagers on a nightly basis. So, you know, those are all factors to consider. That 82 game schedule grind is a serious thing, and it's not an easy thing for an 18-year-old player, you know, for any 18-year-old player to undertake. So
you hardly see like a player like this make the jump that quickly, especially like outside the top 3, top 5 of the draft, like Kelsey. Last year, Macklin Celebrini was really the only one in that class to play more than, I believe it was 20 games. So again, it's just really rare to see this. So it'd be even more rare if he goes beyond the 9 games. But hey, time will tell. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. And something I will say too, I think this kind of, you know, this almost makes me question how much of that conversation is centered on the fact that he wasn't a top 5 pick, you know, because if like a lot of people didn't realize that Kindel was the second leading scorer in the CHL last year among draft eligible forwards, you know, this kid can produce. And, you know, he was showing flashes of that in the preseason. He was showing flashes of his unbelievable hockey smarts for a kid his age. We mentioned, you know, I don't see as much of an issue with his skating as some others saw prior to his draft. And there just seems to be a lot of aspects of his game that I don't think people expected him to be so proficient in so quickly. And, you know, a lot of people were kind of down on this 2025 draft class. But he's not the only one, you know, making to the jump to the NHL out of training camp. There's 5 players from this class that are starting the season in the NHL. So, you know, I think this kind of brings into question to some degree, you know, like maybe this 1 to 5 draft status sort of thing doesn't always apply. Like it was Kindel drafted where he should have been drafted. To me, I mean, you know, you could make the argument that this guy should have gone top 10. A few Western Hockey League scouts contended that before the draft and were kind of drowned out. So, you know, it's an interesting discussion to have, I think, with how much of, you know, the assumption that he's going to be sent back is actually centered on the fact that he just wasn't a high draft pick, you know, a lottery pick. So it'll be interesting to see how that situation plays out. But in general, I do agree with you. I think that, you know, he has to absolutely blow everyone out of the water in order to, stick around. And that's something that the Penguins do have to be very sure about, because we don't know what their timeline is for contention either. So, if they don't see themselves contending in the next 2-3 years, you don't want that ELC timeline to begin too soon where they're going to have to, extend him. So it's just, there's a lot of factors to consider, but at the end of the day, if he blows them out of the water, I can't say I'll be surprised if he sticks around. I said that this time around, but it's going to be a long shot. I'll say that. And I do agree about Brunicke. I think he sticks around. I don't think there's too much question about that, literally just because of the situation that he's in. And I think that makes a great deal of difference. And you raised an interesting point about, if that AHL CHL rule was in effect this season, I do think he would have started in the AHL. They were keeping, that Pickering and Brunicke pairing together for most of camp. I think that probably would have been the top pairing to start in Wilkes-Barre this season had that rule gone through. But they're kind of in a pickle because I think they're, in a place, and Brunicke looks in a place where he's outgrown junior hockey. So you don't want to send him back to a junior team that has a lot of question marks. Maybe he gets traded to a contender during the season and he gets to play in the World Junior Championship. But is that more valuable than him just getting NHL minutes, kind of taken under Erik Karlsson and Chris Letang's wing and just learning from these guys on a nightly basis? So I think just because of his situation, I do think unless he absolutely bombs this 9-game trial, that he is going to stick around for the remainder of the season. But we shall see. It's going to be a fun year. There's a lot of youth populating this roster. And on that note, let's get into some predictions because we are one day out from the NHL season. As we said, we're very excited. And we want to get some standing predictions out there, some playoff predictions. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
Doesn't matter either way.
All right. Well, I'll let you take this one and then I'll close it out.
Should we do the Metro first or what do
you
sure.
Want to do first? Yeah, go ahead and do the Metro first. Let's start there.
All right, so I'll go Carolina number 1. I think they're going to win this division. I'll go New Jersey number 2. I think those two are definitely playoff teams this year, not even close. Number 3, and I've been really going back and forth just because I think a lot of the Metro just flat out stinks this year, if I'm being honest. I think I'm going to go Washington 3. They're going to take a little bit of a step back, but I do think the Capitals make the playoffs, but I just don't think they're going to go that far. I am going to go with I'm going to take the Blue Jackets 4th. I think they're going to have another really good year. Don't know if it's going to be enough to make the playoffs, but they'll be in the conversation. I'll go the Rangers 5th. I don't really know what to expect from them this year, but when I look at this roster on paper, at least, defensively, they stink outside of Adam Fox. I like the Gavrikov signing. At least he's a good partner for him, but the second and third pairings stink. Their bottom 6 stinks. Their top center is Vincent Trocheck. I don't know. I like Mike Sullivan as a head coach a lot. I just don't know how much he's going to get out of that roster. They have the best goaltender on the planet, but I just don't think that team is a playoff team as of right now. Could be dead wrong on that, though, but I have them 5th. And then I have the Islanders 6th, Penguins 7th, Flyers 8th. I will put the Flyers below them. I don't think Philadelphia is going to be very good this year. The Penguins, I don't have them as a bottom 5 team, but I don't have them as a very good team this year either. I have them 7th. I could see them fighting for 6th, though, with the Islanders, who I also don't think are going to be that good this year. But that is what I have for the Metro, at least.
All right. Well, I'll start with my Metro predictions, and then we can get into some other predictions. And actually, the beginning was pretty much the same as yours. I have the Canes. I think that's a relatively easy prediction. I'm not saying it's set in stone. Nothing's set in stone, but the Canes are regular season champs. Let's see if they can get over the hump in the playoffs this season. I have my doubts, but Rod Brindamore knows how to coach a regular season team. So I have the Carolina Hurricanes as 1, also the Devils as 2. I struggle between the Caps and the Blue Jackets for 3 and 4 because I do think, I don't want to say the Capitals kind of were, a false hope story last season. But I do think they were riding a lot of the momentum of the great chase last season. They were probably playing above what they actually are. But I do still have them third. I still think it's going to be enough to make the playoffs. And they still have enough youth talent on the periphery of their roster to compete. And I don't think Ovi's going to fall off a cliff just because he broke the goal record. So I still think he's going to be a pretty formidable player this season. So I have Canes, Devils, Caps, and then I also have the Blue Jackets fourth. I'll get to this later. I'm also not sure if it's going to be enough to push for the playoffs. They're still really weak in goal, and they still could use some improvement on their blue line. I do like their forward group for the most part. There's still some tinkering to be done there, but that blue line gives me a little bit of pause, and then the goaltending, just they need a better situation with that. So Rangers, I have fifth, and I do want to talk about the Rangers for a second because I know a lot of people expect this team to kind of push back for the playoffs this season, but you can be the judge of this. Tell me if you think this is a playoff team. So you have Will Cooley, JT Miller, Mika Zibanejad as your first line, more than likely. And then you have Artemi Panarin, Vinny Trocheck, Alex Lafreniere on the second line. But then you get to this bottom six. You got Connor Sherry, Noah Laba, who's 22-year-old out of Colorado College. Not going to be, a super offensive guy. He might provide some, decent defensive presence for the bottom six. I don't see him blowing anyone out of the water. Then you have Taylor Radish. You have Adam Edstrom, Sam Carrick, Matt Rempe. And then you get to the blue line, beyond that first pairing of Gavrikov and Fox. You have Soucy, you have Carson Soucy, Will Borgen, Vakanainen, I think I'm pronouncing that right, and then Braden Schneider. And then you have Igor and Jonathan Quick. Nothing on that roster, aside from their goaltending, their top six and that top pairing speaks to me like a playoff team. I mean, this bottom six I think, this is probably one of the worst lineups, I think, in the East, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think the Penguins have a better forward group than the New York Rangers do. So, I don't see them as a playoff team this year. And on paper, they're going to need to do a lot more to push them over that ump. So I have them fifth. And then I actually have the Penguins sixth, Flyers seventh, and the Isles eighth. Oh. I just think, I think the Isles, they're aging, they're old. They do have, Matthew Schaefer is obviously making his debut. It remains to be seen whether or not he's going to stick the whole year. I presume he probably will, but we'll see how that shakes out. But, I just feel like when I look up and down this roster, it's pretty uninspiring. Other than that, this forward group is not great. They did sign a Maxim Shabanov out of the KHL this summer, so that he's kind of a wild card. I can see him, maybe factoring in if he can bring some of his game over to North America. But outside of that, it's just a whole lot of meh and old. So I don't think there's enough youth on that roster. I just don't think there's enough talent to really give them much. And Sorokin has been kind of leaky the last couple years. And they're just not getting the goaltending that they were a few years ago either. So I have them in the Flyers finishing bottom two. I know Trevor Zegras is now with the Philadelphia Flyers. That'll be interesting to see how that works out. But they have a weak blue line, weak goaltending. I don't see them getting anywhere. And as for the Penguins, I do think this is an improved forward group from last season. And it'll be pretty interesting to follow that, see where that goes, see if any of the bigger guys are dealt. Same with the blue line with Erik Karlsson, Chris Letang. And now you have Harrison Brunicke in the mix. The left side's atrocious. And goaltending is a big question mark. So I guess out of those three teams, I think the Penguins at least have something going for them with their forward unit. And depending on how much runway they give some of these younger players, I think they could surprise a little bit in terms of standings points. But they're not going to push for the playoffs. I do think they're going to be slightly better than the Flyers and the Isles, though. That's just me.
I think they're going to be a little bit better than the Flyers this year. I actually have the Flyers as a bottom five team right now. That could change. I still have the Sharks and the Blackhawks down there as well. I have the Bruins in there too. I just don't know who is scoring the goals for the Bruins outside of David Pastrnak this year. You want to say Charlie Coyle, couple other guys, sure, but outside of Pasta, there's just not a lot there. I keep seeing, I saw a couple of takes like they're going to be really improved this year. I mean, they got Coyle, no, not Coyle. They have McAvoy, excuse me, Pasta, Swayman. Again, they have a few other pieces, but I just don't think they're going to be very good this year. So those are four, and I will put Nashville in there too. I don't think they're going to be good this year again. So if we had to make bottom 5 predictions, that's what I'm going with right now. I think the Penguins will be a bottom 6 to 10 team as it stands right now. 6 to maybe 11, 12-ish.
Yeah. Well, so what's your bottom 5? I'm sorry. So it was go ahead. What's your bottom 5 again?
Chicago,
Chicago,
San Jose, Boston, Philadelphia, and Nashville.
Okay. Well, ours is a little bit different because I do have Chicago as the bottom feeders in the league. They've done nothing to try to improve their roster. I don't think they're going to be any better this season. I think they're going to be the bottom. And then I actually have Seattle.
It's a good one.
I'm very, very uninspired by anything that the Kraken are doing. I think they're in full tank mode this season. That would be my prediction. I also have the Bruins in this group. I actually have them bottom 3. I just don't think this team is very good. I don't really know another way around saying that. They just don't have much at all. And it'll be interesting to kind of follow the whole Pasta situation too, you know, depending on where they're at the deadline. I don't think he's somebody that they want to particularly, you know, ship off somewhere else, but this team is going nowhere, and I don't think they're going to be going anywhere for the next several years. They just have nothing in the system. They have nothing in the pipeline that's overly inspiring. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. But I have Chicago, Seattle, Boston. I also have Nashville. Then I have the Buffalo Sabres. I can't not. They just need to do something. You know, they're at a crossroads in their organization. They're not committing one way or the other. If you're not going to commit to winning at this point, just commit to the tank and try to get Gavin McKenna. That's my thoughts on that. I just think this organization, this roster is disjointed. There's talent there. They just cannot put it together for the life of them for whatever reason. And on that note, I think the Ducks are going to take a tiny, tiny step and finish like 6th from the bottom this season. I do think the Sharks are going to take another tiny step this season. There's a lot of youth talent there that I'm pretty intrigued by. I think they're going to finish a hair above the Ducks. And then you have, you know, Isles, Canucks, Flyers, Pens, all kind of meshed in the middle. But if I had to guess, I think the Penguins are going to finish right around where they did last season. I think they're going to be around 10th. Would be my prediction. So, but yeah, that bottom 5, I got Chicago, Seattle, Boston, Nashville, and Buffalo.
Those are all fair. I think the Ducks are going to be better this year. I don't think they're playoff level good, though. I know they have expectations to make the playoffs. I think they're going to be, you know, to me, that 7 to 11 range, 8 to 12 range, where, you know, they might be a little bit better this year. I just don't think they're going to contend for a playoff spot. Now, if you want to do, you know, playoff predictions for the 8 teams in each conference, I'm going 5 from the Atlantic, 3 from the Metro, Carolina, New Jersey, Washington. That's the 3 I'm going with the Metro. Atlantic, I'm going to go Toronto. I still think they get in. I know they're replacing 100-plus points in Mitch Marner. I still think they get in. I don't think they win the Atlantic, but I think they get in. Tampa Bay will get in, obviously. I think Ottawa gets in. I think Montreal gets in, and I do think Florida gets in. So it actually is funny. I'm pretty sure with those 8 picks, I'm taking the exact same playoff teams we saw last season in the East. I just don't know. I just don't trust a lot of these other teams to really take a step. This conference stinks at the end of the day. It's really just not good. Other teams finally have a chance now that Barkov is probably out for the entire season. He's not going to play in the regular season. We'll have to see in the playoffs. They have a decision to make. They said 7 to 9 months, but as of right now, he's done for the year. They're still going to get in. They're going to get Matthew Tkachuk back at some point this season. Betting against them is a fool's errand. But I don't trust the Bruins. I don't trust the Sabres. I sure as hell don't trust the Yzer plan in Detroit. And the other teams in the Metro, I just don't trust these teams yet. Like, I think Columbus and the Rangers, they're going to be involved, in pushing for one of those final spots. I know some people are bullish on the Sabres. I just got to see it to believe it first. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going the last the 8 teams I picked this year are the same exact teams that made it last year. So I'm just like, I still think these are the 8 best teams in the conference.
I mean, I'm right there with you. I picked the same exact teams. I think it's going to be the same exact playoff picture from last season because, quite frankly, I just think there's pretty clear disparity in the East between who's a playoff team and who's not. I think there's a little bit more of a murky waters in the West as far as, that wild card area. But in terms of the East, I mean, I just think it's pretty clear cut that these are the 8 best teams in the East. And I don't think there's much question about that. I do think actually Toronto will make a pretty decent push this season. As for my division winners, I had Carolina winning the Metro. I do still have Toronto winning the Atlantic. I think the Lightning and I think the Senators are going to push this year. I think the Senators are going to take a pretty sizable step this season. I think they're going to be a really good hockey team this year. So they're kind of like my little dark horse, I guess. But as far as the Central, I have the Stars, Pacific, Vegas. I think this is just going to look a lot like last year. But in terms of the East playoff picture, same exact thing. I do have a little bit of a change in the West, though. And I'll go ahead and start with my West playoff picture. And then you can, give yours. But I think the Blues caught lightning in a bottle at the end of the season last year and kind of played a little bit above their capabilities. I have them missing this season. And I have Vegas. I have Dallas, Edmonton, Colorado. I have the Jets, LA, and then I have the Wild. And I have the Utah Mammoth making the playoffs this season. I think this is their year. They did enough this offseason to kind of help that push a little bit. They already have a lot of budding young talent on their roster. I think goaltending's still a little bit of a question mark. They probably have to get a little bit more assurance between the pipes to really contend for a Stanley Cup or be a legitimate contender. But I think they're going to sneak into one of those wild card spots this season. I really like the youth on this roster, and I think they're doing a good job of building out around that. So what do you think? What do you got out West?
So for the West, I got Colorado getting in, very obvious. I got Dallas going in. I still have Minnesota making it, especially now that they paid Kaprizov. I like that team going into the year, and I think they're going to make some more additions around the trade deadline. I do have Winnipeg getting in. I think they're not going to be as good as they were last year now that they especially lost Nikolai Ehlers, but I still think they're good enough to make the playoffs. And I'm actually with you. I am going to take Utah to make it over St. Louis. I hate betting against Jim Montgomery just because his style really does work, and the Blues were very good down the stretch. They were scoring at will. They were defending really well. I just really like Utah's young forwards. Their defensive group, I think, is really underrated in the NHL, and I do think they have the goaltending to really make this work as well. So I will take Utah, and that means the 3 from the Pacific, kind of the same as last year. You have Vegas going in very obviously, the Oilers going in, and I will take the Kings to make it as well, especially in Kopitar's last season. Probably means, Kelsey, we're going to have Oilers Kings round 7,000.
6,000, yeah.
I don't need to see it anymore, but, we probably will just because I don't really trust anyone else in the Pacific. I know the Ducks have high expectations. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. The Flames were really in the race last year. I think they were a little above where they should have been. I have them taking a little bit of a step back. Seattle, I don't think is going to be very good. Vancouver is always so interesting to me. They're very much a boomer bust team. I kind of have them in the middle. I don't have them making it this year, but hey, if Pettersson bounces back, Quinn Hughes goes off again, they get some other contributions in their lineup. I could see them making a playoff push, but as of right now, I have them on the outside.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I have Vancouver as a bottom 10 team this year. I don't think this team's going anywhere this year. But, like you said, they're a little bit of a wild card. You just never know with them. Because I don't think anybody expected them to be, one of the best teams in the league a couple seasons ago. And then, they turned that right back around last season and became a non-playoff team. So you just never know what you're going to get with them. I'm not very bullish on them this season. But yeah, I think that West playoff chase is going to be really interesting this year. And the West is very top heavy. There are just a lot of really good teams in the West this year. So I do want to ask you for your final prediction. Who's going to the finals this season? And who is taking it home?
Oh boy. From the West, I'm going to take Vegas. I think top to bottom, when healthy, I think this is the best team in the conference. And now they have Mitch Marner, who, I mean, it's going to be great for them. He's great in all three zones. He can give them a lot of points. He doesn't even have to go over 100 just because Bruce Cassidy, they defend so well. Like, he's such a great defensive coach that he doesn't need Mitch Marner to go over 100. He's still going to be great, but don't be surprised if he doesn't get 100 plus points. He's still going to get a lot, though, this year. They have the goaltending. Even with Pietrangelo out, their defensive group, I still think, is fairly solid. And, they're never satisfied. I see them making another move before the deadline. The East is so weird because, like, I want to take Florida, but without Barkov in the playoffs, he's such a difference maker where he can take away the top opposition. Honestly, I mean, oh boy. I've been really blanking on who I'm taking from the East because, like, I can make arguments for a whole bunch of different teams. I'm not going to take Carolina just because I got to see it first. But I'm going to go with an Atlantic team. It's going to be weird. I am going to go Tampa here. I know they're a bit top heavy, but they started to make some better changes to their bottom six at the end of last season. Vasilevsky is still great. If Barkov is not available for the playoffs and the Panthers are a bit gassed, I think that the Lightning will potentially be able to take them there. And I think they can get through this conference, especially if, Kucherov and them are healthy. They've been a first round exit the last few years, but they have their legs, I think, for this year now. So I'm going to go Tampa. And I have the Golden Knights winning it. I have Mitch Marner making everyone in Toronto very mad this year. So I'm going to take Vegas to win the cup. I'm not as confident in my East pick just because I don't trust a lot of these teams in the conference, but I am going to go Tampa here, mainly because I just don't think the Panthers will go to the final again, especially without Barkov.
Fair. And, I want to go against every instinct here and pick Florida to 3P because this is one thing, this team, we haven't seen anything quite like this team. And, all logic is telling me the same thing about Barkov, that there's no way this team pushes through the playoffs without him. He's that important to this team. But, I keep going back to, they're kind of just that cockroach that won't die.
Yeah.
They just, in just the way, their path to the playoffs doesn't matter. Like, they're one of those teams, and the only team I can think of in the entire cap era that it doesn't matter if there's an 8 seed, it doesn't matter if they're a 1 seed, it doesn't matter where they seed or how they get into the playoffs. It's just about getting there. So at the end of the day, it's just one of those things. I just don't think there is a team in the East that matches up to the Florida Panthers right now. And that is going to hinge on their playoff success, is going to hinge on Barkov and whether or not he can return in time. If he doesn't, I have my doubts. I want to pick them, but I'm going to defy logic here, and I'm going to go with the Ottawa Senators from the East. I like this team this year. I think they have a really solid forward group, and it's really coming into its own. And I do think they could probably still add to their blue line, maybe on the left side. But honestly, there's not much weakness on this team, and they still have pretty solid goaltending. They have, like I said, the forward unit to compete. I think this team's going to take a step this year. I think they're going to be really hard to play against. And if it's not Florida, I think it's going to be Ottawa coming out of the East. And I do agree with you. Vegas is an absolute powerhouse this season. I have a really hard time seeing any team beat the Vegas Golden Knights in a best of 7. You talk about the Edmonton Oilers. For those that don't know, Connor McDavid did sign a 2-year extension today for only $12.5 million per season. So he's got 3 more years in Edmonton as of right now. That was kind of a prove it deal from Connor McDavid to the Edmonton Oilers, saying, hey, we need to get this done in the next couple years, otherwise I'm gone. So,
I have the same type of take. Like, I'm gonna be here for a few more years. If we don't win one, I'm out. And you guys better make the necessary moves to make sure that I can win one here. or I'm going to try to find another team. He obviously very much wants to win there. I think first and foremost, he took a really big discount. He could have gotten 17, 18 million if he wanted to, but he was like, hey, I'm going to take a little bit of a discount, but you better be sure to help me out, or I think I'm going to walk away to go to another team.
Yeah, and especially with that discount, he's basically telling them, like, here's your cap space, do something with it. Like kind of poking them and saying, hey, you got to do something with the opportunity that I'm giving you here. So, but I mean, circling back to my point, I just don't see Edmonton making the final 3 years in a row. I still think that this team is too top heavy. It's too reliant on its two best players. It's too reliant on Stuart Skinner and the other goaltending, whatever their goaltending situation shakes out to be this year, because that's a whole other question mark in itself. It's too reliant on these guys, catching lightning in a bottle and their goaltenders performing well enough to get them through some of these rounds until they can get to a point where, they're playing a little bit better as a team. But I don't think this team is strong enough to get to 3 straight finals without being on the backs of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl yet again. So I see Vegas beating Edmonton, and I do think Vegas is also going to be your Stanley Cup champion this season. I think them and Florida, hands down, are the 2 best teams in this league. I don't think it's particularly close. Florida's injury situation is going to complicate things this year, so we'll see. I want to say Florida, but I'm not gonna.
If Barkov was healthy, I would take them back to the final. I would say that. If he was healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of want to change my answer on the fly. Like, I feel like I'm talking myself into Florida, but I'm going to stick with the Sens. I'm going to pick a little dark horse team. We're going to go with the Senators, the Vegas Golden Knights. And if that is the final, I think the Vegas Golden Knights are going to make pretty quick work of the Senators too. So, but we'll see. But yeah, that was it, guys. Hockey season is upon us. We're all very happy. We couldn't be more excited to bring you coverage for this whole season on the hockey news. We'll have a lot of stuff for you guys over the next couple days too, so check out the site. But for Hunter Hodes, I'm Kelsey Sermats. We will be back at you with another episode next week, so we will see you then.